The skies above Varnock had turned dark long before the sun disappeared. Clouds of ash and smoke covered the once beautiful atmosphere, and the scent of burning metal floated through the air like a silent warning. The ground trembled with every explosion, and the cries of the innocent echoed through the broken cities. The Theran people, known for their peaceful nature and rich culture, were now reduced to frightened survivors hiding in the ruins of their once great civilization. Their tall crystal towers had collapsed, their green floating gardens had withered, and the great lakes had turned black from the falling ash. Varnock was dying, not from natural disaster or disease, but from the invasion of a merciless empire known across the stars, the Korath Dominion. No one had expected the Korath to reach so deep into this sector, but they had come without warning, attacking from orbit with massive warships that blocked out the stars. Their soldiers, tall and armored in red, showed no mercy, destroying everything in their path. They didn't ask for surrender or offer peace. They came only to conquer. The capital city of Lysera, the last of the Theran High Council, gathered in a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of the Grand Hall. Their robes were torn, and fear was visible in their tired eyes. High Speaker Relma, the oldest among them, stared at the glowing map of the planet's surface. Red markers covered it completely. Their forces were gone, their defenses shattered, and their emergency fleets had been destroyed in orbit during the first wave. Relma knew what this meant: extinction. Still, her voice remained calm as she addressed the others. "There is one chance left," she said quietly, her hands trembling as she reached toward the ancient communicator. "We send the signal. We ask for help." The other council members exchanged glances. "No one will come," one whispered. "We are alone." But Relma shook her head. "There are worlds out there," she said. "And if the stories are true, one of them may still listen." A planet called Earth. That name hung in the silence. It was spoken in myths, always whispered with awe. No one had ever confirmed Earth's existence, but some said its warriors once helped a dying race thousands of years ago. Now, that hope was all they had. The signal was simple. It carried no pride, no demands, only desperation. A cry for help, sent through the last functioning beacon hidden deep beneath the ground. As it launched into space, piercing through the remains of Varnock's atmosphere, no one knew if it would ever be heard. Above them, the Korath ships continued to descend, launching more soldiers, more machines of war. Fires spread like waves, and even the great temples of Lysera were reduced to dust. The Theran had nothing left. In the outer colonies, where the young and old had been sent for safety, the enemy's war machines now marched through empty streets. The screams that followed were broadcasted by the Korath to break morale. But even as the sounds echoed across every device, the Theran refused to surrender. Small groups of defenders, armed with basic weapons and little hope, still fought in the shadows of the cities. They knew they could not win, but they also knew that some things were more important than survival. Their children, their history, and their last hope for freedom lived in the idea that someone might hear their call. Days passed like years. The sky never cleared. Ash covered the surface like snow, and the air grew colder. In the last shelter beneath Lysera, High Speaker Relma sat beside the beacon, watching its dim light pulse. She had not left its side. The younger council members begged her to rest, but she refused. Her eyes stared upward, though no stars could be seen. "Please," she whispered to the darkness above, "if there is anyone out there, if you can hear us, we need you now." Outside the shelter, the sounds of battle faded. The Korath had found the last resistance forces and crushed them. Their flag, a symbol of endless hunger, was raised above the ruins. The war was over. Varnock had lost. The Korath generals declared victory. Their leader, Supreme Warlord Dexer, gave the final command to wipe the surface clean and prepare it for colonization. The few remaining Theran would be gathered, enslaved, or silenced forever. But then, something strange happened. A flicker in the Korath systems, a disturbance in their orbital scanners. A pulse of unknown energy appeared far above the planet, then vanished. It was ignored at first. A glitch, perhaps. But then it happened again. A second pulse, stronger, clearer. It came from deep space, heading straight toward Varna. The Korth ships tried to trace it, but the signal was encrypted in a language they didn't recognize. And then silence. No one knew what it meant. But below, in the shelter, Relma opened her eyes. The beacon had gone dark. The signal had been received. That night, as the fires burned across the land and the last Thorin gathered for what they believed would be their final hours, the wind changed. A strange vibration passed through the ground. The air thickened. The Korth soldiers, usually calm and ruthless, began scanning the skies with nervous expressions. Their commanders issued alerts. Defense systems activated. Something was coming, but it wasn't Therin. It wasn't a threat they recognized. High above the planet, hidden by the clouds of war, something ancient and powerful entered Varnak's orbit without a sound. And in that moment, just before the next sunrise, the sky cracked open. The silence before the storm was unlike anything Varnak had known during this long and brutal invasion. The fires still burned in the distance, and the ash-filled sky remained heavy, but something had changed in the air, something invisible, yet deeply felt. The Korth soldiers stood alert, their scanners twitching, unable to lock on to the strange pulses in the upper atmosphere. Their commanders issued urgent communications to the fleet above, demanding explanations, but even the massive warships circling the planet couldn't provide answers. Something was interfering with their systems, something powerful and unknown. High in orbit, invisible to the Korth's advanced surveillance, a single black ship hung in silence. It didn't resemble any known design. It had no identification codes, no known energy signature, and no visible weapons. But inside, it was far from empty. Dozens of armored figures stood in place, each one still as stone, their visors glowing with a dim blue light. They waited without speaking. Their armor, dark and thick like the void, was unlike anything seen in this part of the galaxy. They were not aliens, not machines. They were human, and they had come with purpose. Far below, High Speaker Relma stood outside the shelter for the first time in days. Her old eyes searched the sky, though there were no stars, no sun, just thick clouds and falling ash. Yet she could feel something. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was something close. A deep sound began to rise, low and steady, like thunder beneath the surface. The ground trembled. Korth vehicles in the ruined city came to a stop, their engines suddenly silent. Soldiers looked up, confused, weapons ready. The sky grew darker as the wind screamed louder. Then, in a flash that blinded both friend and foe, the clouds above Lysara were ripped apart. A blinding blue-white light split the heavens like a sword. The crack was wide and violent, and through it came objects unlike anything the Thorin or Korth had ever seen. Dozens of black pods rained down, falling faster than anything natural. They didn't explode on impact. They struck with precision, embedding themselves into the ground and staying perfectly still. The first to land hit the center of the city, sending out a shockwave that shattered glass and threw dust into the air. The Korth reacted immediately, surrounding the pods with heavy firepower, preparing for an enemy they didn't understand. They fired plasma bolts and charged their cannons, but before they could strike, the pods opened. Hatches hissed, metal folded back, and out stepped figures that moved with terrifying calm. Clad in jet-black armor, taller than most Thorin and silent as the void, they raised weapons no one had ever seen before. The first shot came not from their rifles, but from a handheld disc that released a pulse so strong it disabled all Korth systems within 50 meters. Turrets collapsed, lights blinked out, and the enemy stood frozen for just a moment too long. Then came the true strike. The humans moved like shadows, fast and smooth, using cover like they were born from the battlefield itself. Each shot they fired was accurate and final. The Korth, known for their brutality and strength, fell in numbers they had never experienced before. Panic spread through their ranks as their advantage slipped through their claws. The Thorin survivors watched from the ruins, stunned into silence. These new warriors didn't speak, didn't hesitate. They worked in teams of 3 or 4, clearing entire zones in minutes, using signals and short commands that no one else understood. Their weapons weren't just powerful, They were designed for efficiency, disabling enemy gear, shielding civilians, and cutting through the toughest armor like it was paper. He didn't slow down even when a plasma cannon fired directly at him. His armor absorbed the hit, and in one motion, he launched a device that melted the cannon into slag. He didn't stop to celebrate. He moved on, his eyes focused forward. The Korath began retreating, trying to regroup and bring in reinforcements from orbit, but something strange had happened above. Their warships, once in total control, had gone silent. Unseen to those on the ground, the black human vessel hovering in orbit had disabled the enemy's entire fleet in less than 6 minutes. No weapons were fired. It used silent pulses of electromagnetic force, targeting weak points with surgical precision, turning mighty ships into drifting metal tombs. Without orbital support, the Korath ground forces lost coordination. They panicked. They made mistakes. And the humans exploited every single one. Back in the shelter, the beacon pulsed again, but this time, it wasn't sending a message. It was receiving one. A short signal appeared on its interface. Assistance received. Stay underground. Hostiles will be removed. Relma stared at it in disbelief. It wasn't a dream. Earth had answered. She turned to the council, her voice steady for the first time in days. "They heard us," she whispered. "They're here." Outside, the tide of battle turned in ways no one could have predicted. The Korath were not used to defeat. Their empire had expanded for centuries without resistance. But now, they were being hunted by warriors who didn't stop, didn't fear, and didn't hesitate. The Theron had fought with courage, but these new arrivals fought with mastery. There was no waste, no mercy, and no failure. Hours later, as the sun finally broke through a crack in the clouds for the first time in weeks, the city of Lysera stood quiet. Smoke still rose from some of the ruins, but the Korath banners had been torn down. Their remaining soldiers had either been captured or eliminated. The black pods, now empty, stood like statues in the streets, while the human warriors moved quickly from zone to zone, confirming victory and securing survivors. They didn't celebrate. They didn't cheer. Their mission wasn't over yet. There were still other cities, other survivors, and more Korath forces to remove. But for now, they had made their message clear not just to the Theron, but to the galaxy. Earth had heard the call. And when Earth's warriors fall from the sky, they bring the storm with them. They did not come to be known by name, nor did they care for recognition. The galaxy called them many things, ghosts, monsters, shadows, but on Earth, they had one title, the Apex Unit. Selected from every nation, trained beyond breaking point, and sharpened by war, they were not just soldiers, they were Earth's silent answer to cosmic threats. No one knew their exact number. Even their own government spoke of them in whispers. And now, they walked the shattered streets of Lysera with heavy boots and focused minds, showing no emotion as they passed the ruins and wounded. These were not heroes of speeches and flags. These were professionals perfectly trained, completely controlled, and terrifyingly effective. Each warrior moved with purpose, scanning the environment, checking every corridor and tunnel. Their armor wasn't just protection, it was a complete war system, adaptive, reactive, and intelligent. The helmets scanned for heat, sound, and motion. The suits could heal minor injuries and stabilize major ones. They had trained in zero gravity, survived deep pressure, resisted radiation, and fought in atmospheres far worse than Lysera's poisoned sky. Captain Idris was their leader, a man who had fought in more battles than he could count, and who had never once allowed a member of his squad to fall. His face, always hidden behind his dark visor, was known only to his team. Even the Theron, in their desperation and curiosity, could not speak to him directly. He simply moved through their ruins like a quiet force of nature. Where he went, order followed. In the destroyed command tower of the city, he established a new field base, setting up scanners, deploying drones, and mapping out enemy movements across the continent. The Korath were not gone yet, not fully. Their ships were silent, but their scattered forces still remained in hidden bases and underground bunkers. They had always considered the Thorin weak prey, not worth serious attention. But now, after losing thousands of troops in a matter of hours, they were trying to regroup, to understand what had hit them. They were warriors who believed in domination, but they had never met humans in direct combat. That mistake would cost them dearly. The Apex unit did not wait for orders from Earth. They already knew what needed to be done. Rescue the survivors, neutralize the remaining threats, and secure Lysera before moving outward. Their plans were executed with robotic precision, but they were not machines. These were humans with deep emotion buried, trained, controlled, but still alive. Each one had lost someone on another world, or survived a battle that no one else walked away from. Their silence was not emptiness, it was the weight of purpose. They knew they were not here to make friends. They were here to win. Theron children peeked out from broken buildings as the soldiers passed. Some cried. Some simply stared. The warriors never spoke to them, but every child was given water, food, and blankets. The Apex moved fast, never resting long, always watching the skies and shadows. One of them, a woman named Silva, carried a scanner that tracked biosignatures across vast distances. She was the first to detect a massive heat source approaching from the southern mountains. A Korath crawler, armored like a fortress and bristling with weapons, was trying to reach the city to re-establish control. It was too big to hide, but too strong to ignore. Instead of calling for backup, the Apex unit moved immediately. Idris led 6 members on foot, using the terrain for cover. They crossed rocky paths, slipped through ash-covered forests, and reached the enemy crawler in less than an hour. The Korath soldiers never saw them coming. A silent drone disabled the crawler's external sensors. A jamming beacon shut down communications. Then, with silent precision, the humans entered through a maintenance hatch and moved through the ship like ghosts. The fight lasted only 4 minutes. By the time the crawler's lights came back on, the Apex unit had already marked it as secure and was moving on to the next target. Meanwhile, Earth monitored everything from afar. High-orbit satellites fed live data to hidden command centers across the solar system. Military leaders watched in silence as their elite warriors tore through enemy lines with stunning speed. Some questioned whether they had become too cold, too detached from the rest of humanity. Others saw the truth: they had become what was needed in a galaxy full of danger. While diplomats spoke and civilians hoped, the Apex unit acted. Their presence on Lysera was not about politics. It was a warning. Earth was no longer isolated. Earth was awake. And when its elite warriors landed on a world, things changed forever. Relma, still weak but stronger now with each passing hour, was brought to the field base. She expected to be ignored or dismissed, but instead, she was given a detailed map, a communication device, and a seat beside the human's command console. She watched as Idris and his team coordinated operations across dozens of zones. They used no wasted words, made no unnecessary moves. Every action had a goal. Every goal served a mission. She realized something then: these humans didn't just fight with force. They fought with intelligence, speed, and precision that no army in the galaxy could match. They had turned war into a science. And science was never kind to those who stood in its way. The other Theron cities soon began sending weak signals. Survivors hiding underground, desperate for help, whispered across channels that had been dark for weeks. The Apex picked up each one and responded immediately. Within hours, teams were deployed by shuttle and drop pod, striking deep into Korath-held zones and clearing the way for rescue. No one could believe the speed at which the war turned. The Korath, once feared across this side of the galaxy, were losing ground to a force they had never planned for. Their pride had blinded them. They thought humans were a minor species, limited, fragile, emotional. They had never seen what Earth truly kept hidden. Now, across the stars, other empires began to listen. Signals bounced through deep space, carrying only one message: Earth's elite warriors have entered the war. No threats. No requests. Just a fact and a warning. Some laughed. Some prepared. Some began to worry. Because when the sky cracks open and humans fall like thunder, it's already too late. The air had changed. The silence over the ruined cities of Lysara was no longer one of fear, but of focus. A strange energy moved through the atmosphere, one that the surviving Theron could feel in their bones. For weeks, they had known only destruction and loss, watching their cities burn, their leaders vanish, and their enemies grow stronger by the hour. But now, something was different. Whispers spread through the underground shelters and broken tunnels, whispers of humans who struck like lightning, who walked into enemy-held zones without hesitation, who did not lose. They were not myth. They were real. And with every hour, their presence grew louder. It began with small victories, rescue teams saving entire Theron families, command posts reactivated under human control, enemy patrols vanishing without a trace. But soon, these small wins became waves, and then those waves became a tide, one that no Korath weapon could hold back. Captain Idris stood over the map of the region, his armor streaked with dust and ash. Around him, his team moved like clockwork, analyzing drone footage, updating coordinates, adjusting attack plans. No one waited for permission. Each warrior knew their task. As more Theron units crawled out of hiding, desperate to join the fight, the humans didn't push them aside. Instead, they gave them weapons, gear, and short, sharp training drills. No long speeches, no endless strategies, just action. And that action changed everything. Under human coordination, foreign fighters who had once been disorganized and frightened now moved like proper soldiers. They followed instructions, set traps, flanked enemy patrols, and fought back with a fire they had almost forgotten. Earth's elite had not only brought skill, they had brought hope. In the southern mountains, a major Korath stronghold had become a symbol of fear. From there, waves of armored crawlers and drones had been launched to crush resistance. The base was protected by heavy turrets and force fields, hidden deep within the rock. Every Theron attempt to reach it had failed, resulting in heavy losses. But Idris didn't see a wall, he saw an opening. His unit, now reinforced by newly trained Theron fighters, launched a two-phase attack that stunned even their allies. First, a decoy team of humans created chaos on the northern edge, drawing fire and attention. Then, using underground mining tunnels long forgotten, they emerged inside the base itself, behind enemy lines, and dismantled its control systems from within. When the outer walls finally fell, and the smoke cleared, the Korath base was in ruins, and hundreds of Theron fighters stood at its gates in awe. For the first time in months, they had not just survived, they had won. The Korath reacted with confusion and fury. Their warlords, once arrogant and mocking in their communication, now sent desperate commands for reinforcements. Entire fleets were redirected from other parts of the galaxy, but by the time they arrived, they found the skies filled with human orbital defenses, satellite cannons, and fighter wings. Earth's military had decided that Lacera would not fall. They did not say this in words. They proved it with fire and steel. And the enemy finally realized that this was not a war of occupation anymore. It was a battle for survival. Across the cities, more Theron leaders began to emerge. Relma, once a quiet and injured survivor, had become a symbol of resistance. She worked closely with the Apex unit, coordinating Theron support teams and managing supplies for both human and alien fighters. Where once she had felt powerless, now she held command over a growing alliance. The humans respected her not for rank or title, but for action. She never backed down, never hesitated. And in their presence, she had learned something critical. Bravery is not about being unafraid. It is about standing up even when fear is overwhelming. She carried that lesson into every mission, and others followed her lead. But as victories grew, so did the enemy's desperation. The Korath, unable to win through strength, began using terror. They set traps in ruined hospitals, launched suicide drones into civilian shelters, and tried to use fear as their final weapon. Yet it did not work. Not this time. Because the humans had already faced every kind of fear. They had trained for chaos, survived betrayal, and endured worse on their own homeworld. When the Korath set buildings on fire, the humans ran into them. When they dropped bombs, the Apex unit was already moving survivors to safety. No trick, no threat, no horror could stop them. And slowly, Even the most broken Theron citizen began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this war could be won. The tide had turned, and Earth's warriors had made sure it would never turn back. Idris now planned the final phase of the operation, clearing the skies of remaining enemy ships and hunting down the last of the Korath commanders hiding deep beneath the surface. His team moved with quiet confidence. They were tired, bruised, and had lost some of their own. But they had never stopped, because for them, this was not just about Lysara. It was about the message. Across the stars, other species watched and waited, unsure of what humanity truly was. The Korath had made a choice to provoke Earth, to test its strength, to target a species that had not yet revealed its full potential. And now, the galaxy was watching the result. As the sun rose over the ruined capital, lighting up broken towers and scattered debris, something incredible happened. A line of Theron civilians, young and old, stepped out into the open square. Behind them came soldiers, engineers, medics, all survivors who had stayed hidden for months. And together, they raised the old Theron flag once again, placing it in the center of the square, not as a symbol of power, but as a sign of defiance. The crowd stood silently, watching as Idris and his team passed by. And for the first time since arriving, Idris stopped. He removed his helmet, revealing a weathered face marked by years of war. No speeches. No gestures. Just a moment of quiet respect between two species who had found strength in each other. That day, the humans didn't just win a battle. They reminded a broken world what it meant to stand again. And far beyond Lysara, in hidden systems and dark empires, a new name was whispered with fear and respect: Earth. The turning tide had begun, and no one, not even the mighty Korath, could stop what was coming. The battlefield was quiet, but the silence did not bring peace. Smoke still floated in the air, and the ruins of once great cities lay scattered across the plains of Lysara. Yet, among this destruction, there was a powerful feeling, something that had not been present since the first day the Korath had arrived. It was not fear. It was not sorrow. It was the beginning of something far greater. For those who had survived the invasion, who had watched their world fall into darkness, this moment felt like the end of despair. And the reason was clear: Earth's warriors had come, and they had not just fought the enemy, they had awakened the spirit of the Thoran people. Captain Idris stood on the roof of a damaged tower, overlooking the valley where the last major Korath base had just been destroyed. The sun cast golden light through the smoke, and in that strange glow, he could see movement everywhere: Theron citizens rebuilding streets, human engineers helping repair energy lines, and patrols of mixed-species teams keeping watch over what was now a free land. It had not been easy. Many had fallen. Some missions had almost failed. But the enemy had been broken, their leadership shattered, their ships fleeing the system in scattered panic. And now, for the first time since the start of the war, Lysara breathed again. Word spread faster than fire in dry grass. Across other star systems, in hidden resistance cells and terrified colonies, the name Earth began to carry weight, not because of cruelty or dominance, but because of what these humans had done. They had not come for conquest. They had come for honor. They had landed on a dying planet, stood between its people and the monsters who tried to erase them, and turned a hopeless war into a legend. But that legend wasn't built in one day. It was made of pain, sacrifice, and choices that few could make. Idris remembered the faces of his fallen warriors who had stayed behind so others could escape, scouts who walked into traps just to gather intel, medics who gave their own supplies to save strangers. Each loss had weighed on him, but now those sacrifices meant something. Because the Korath were retreating. Their command ships had left orbit 2 days ago, chased by Earth's fleet, and their remaining soldiers had either surrendered or been hunted down in the wilds by Thoran units who now fought with fury. For the first time in their history, the Thoran had learned not just how to survive, but how to resist. And the credit for that went to the humans who had shown them how. Among those humans, Silva had become a name passed around like a secret weapon. She had led missions that seemed impossible, surviving situations no one else could have escaped. Her ability to read battlefields, adapt mid-mission, and inspire those around her had changed the course of more than one engagement. But she never took the spotlight. After each success, she returned to the planning table, reviewed what could have gone better, and prepared for the next strike. Her calm nature in chaos, combined with a quiet loyalty to her team, made her the kind of leader others followed without question. And then there was Relma. She had once been a frightened survivor. Now, she stood beside Idris as a symbol of everything the Tharan could become. Dressed not in royal robes, but in battle armor, she spoke to her people through action. She led rebuilding efforts, organized medical care, and trained young Tharan to defend their homes. The humans had given them strength, but she made sure that strength remained long after the last Earth ship returned home. And the bond between these two species, once strangers, had become something unbreakable. The galaxy, however, was watching. Other empires, some silent and some secretly hoping for Earth's defeat, now found themselves facing a new reality. If the humans could arrive on a dying planet and turn the tide with only a few teams, what could they do with a full force? And if their warriors inspired allies instead of dominating them, then Earth was not just a military power, it was a unifying one. Reports began to spread of planets lighting beacons for help, of governments secretly requesting contact with Earth, and of former enemies reconsidering their alliances. But Earth did not respond with threats. They answered with action. Aid ships were already arriving on Lysera, filled with supplies, tools, and tech to help rebuild what had been lost. Engineers worked side by side with Tharan crews, not as masters but as partners. Children who had once hidden in fear now followed humans through the streets, listening to their stories, touching their strange gear, and smiling for the first time in months. These moments, quiet and simple, carried more power than any battle ever could. Still, the fight was not truly over. Deep in the outer systems, the remaining Korath commanders plotted revenge. But they now faced a galaxy that no longer feared them. Their threats rang hollow, and their soldiers, once loyal, now whispered doubts in the dark. The myth of Korath invincibility had been shattered. And in its place, a new legend had begun. One that would be told, not just on Lysera, but across the stars. A story of humans who had no reason to help but did. Of warriors who had no need for glory, yet won it anyway. Of a world that was almost forgotten, saved at the last moment by those who refused to let it die. As Idris looked down at the growing crowd below, gathering for a final ceremony in honor of the fallen, he felt something strange and unfamiliar peace. Not because the danger was gone, but because they had proven that courage and unity could defeat even the darkest enemy. The people of Lysera would rebuild. The humans would eventually return to their world. But the bond between them would remain forever, and long after the fires burned out and the ruins were cleared, the story would survive. They would call it the day the tide turned. The moment despair became legend. And at the heart of that legend, Earth's warriors would stand, not as invaders, but as protectors remembered not for how many enemies they killed, but for how many lives they saved.